He bought a rusted iron safe for $3, but when the door creaked open, he froze in shock. Inside, two little twins, trembling, forgotten, left to die. In a land where lawmen take bribes and orphans are called property, one mountain man makes a choice that could cost him everything. He carries the children home, but the sheriff comes knocking, demanding the girls be turned over to strangers who see only profit. Now, whispers spread through the dusty streets, the church bell tolls, and even the marshals ride in. The cabin on the edge of the timberline becomes a battleground between greed and mercy. But the truth hidden in that safe is more powerful than anyone knows. Can one man's faith and courage shield two innocent lives against the iron hand of the law? Or will the twins be torn away before they ever truly have a home? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mining town's dusty main street as Jonas Hale shifted his weight against the weathered hitching post. His clean shirt and pressed trousers stood out among the unwashed miners and drifters who had gathered for the auction. The creak of leather and jingle of spurs mixed with rough laughter and the sharp calls of the auctioneer. Jonas watched through narrowed eyes as items were sold off one by one: mining equipment, saddles, crates of supplies. His attention caught on an old iron safe dragged into view. Rust had eaten away at its corners, and the combination dial was frozen with age. The auctioneer, a thin man with a drooping mustache, gave it a dismissive kick. "Next up, this worthless heap of metal," he called out with a mocking grin. "Combination's lost, probably empty anyway. Who'll give me $5? Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. No hands went up. $3? The auctioneer's voice held contempt. Surely someone needs a nice doorstop? More snickers from the assembled buyers. Jonas studied the safe carefully, noting its solid construction despite the surface rust. Something about it niggled at his mind. A faint memory of news about a riverboat fire up north, a few weeks back. $3, Jonas called out quietly, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $3 from the gentleman in the clean shirt. He looked around hopefully. Anyone want to go $3.50? The crowd just shook their heads, some openly laughing at Jonas's apparent foolishness. Sold then to the man with more money than sense, the auctioneer banged his gavel with obvious relief at being rid of the thing. Jonas ignored the jeers and arranged with two workers to load the safe onto his wagon. He kept his expression neutral as they complained about its weight, though inwardly his suspicions deepened. Empty safes weren't usually quite so heavy. Once the crowd dispersed, Jonas guided his team down a narrow alley behind the saloon, well away from curious eyes. The buildings blocked most of the remaining sunlight, but privacy mattered more than good visibility right now. He climbed down from the wagon seat and studied his purchase more closely. The safe was old but well made, probably from back east. Jonas ran his fingers along the seams, testing. Then he retrieved a heavy hammer and steel wedge from his toolbox. Working methodically, he positioned the wedge in the gap beside the hinges and struck it with careful force. The first blow rang out like a bell. Jonas paused, listening for any response from the street, but the saloon's piano music covered the sound. He struck again and again, feeling the metal begin to give. With a grinding screech of tortured iron, the door suddenly shifted. Jonas set down his tools and pulled, muscles straining against decades of rust. The hinges protested but finally gave way, the heavy door swinging wide. Jonas stumbled back, the breath leaving his lungs in a rush. Two tiny faces stared up at him from the darkness inside, their eyes huge with terror. Little girls, both of them, no more than 4 years old. Their dark skin was ashy with dust, clothes reduced to ragged scraps. Dried tears had left the tracks through the grime on their cheeks. "Dear Lord in heaven," Jonas whispered. The girls pressed closer together, trembling. One, slightly larger, pushed the smaller behind her protectively. Her cracked lips moved, forming a word. "Miriam," she whispered hoarsely. The smaller girl peeked around her sister's shoulder. "Ava," she breathed, her voice barely audible. Jonas's mind raced. Children, living children, sealed in an iron box like cargo. His hands clenched into fists as rage warred with heartbreak. But he forced his voice to stay gentle, knowing he must look like a giant to these little ones. "It's all right now," he said softly, crouching down to their level. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his water canteen. Both girls tracked the movement, their parched lips parting unconsciously at the sight of water. Moving slowly, telegraphing each motion, Jonas unscrewed the cap and held it out. "Here now. Small sips, mind, not too fast." Miriam reached out with trembling fingers, took the canteen, and helped Ava drink first before taking her own careful swallows. Jonas noticed how she steadied her sister's hands, how she watched him warily, even while drinking. Such a little thing, but already carrying so much responsibility. The late sun slanted deeper into the alley, painting everything in stark shadows. Jonas knew he needed to get the girls somewhere safe before full dark, but he had to move carefully. They were clearly terrified, and he had no wish to add to their trauma. "My cabin's not far," he said gently. "Got food there and clean blankets. Would you let me take you someplace warm and safe?" Miriam studied him with eyes too old for her young face. "Mama said wait in the safe place," she whispered. "Till she came back." Jonas's heart clenched. He had a terrible suspicion about what had happened to their mama, remembering again that news of the river fire. But that was a truth for another time. "Your mama wanted you to be safe," he said carefully, "and you were very brave, waiting like she told you. But now you need food and rest and proper care. Will you trust me to help?" Ava's small hand found his sleeve, fingers clutching the fabric. "Papa?" she asked hopefully, looking up at him with such naked longing that Jonas felt his throat close up. "I'll take care of you," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of you." Moving with infinite gentleness, Jonas gathered them up in his arms. They were frightfully light, all bird bones and hollow spaces where baby roundness should have been. Ava buried her face in his neck immediately, while Miriam held herself slightly apart, still watching, still protecting. The dusk shadows stretched longer across the dirt as Jonas carried them to his wagon. His life had changed forever in the space of a moment, and he knew it. These precious lives were in his hands now, and he would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. He settled them carefully in the wagon bed, wrapping his spare coat around their thin shoulders. As he climbed up to the driver's seat, he heard a sound that nearly broke him. Ava's quiet giggle as Miriam tickled her sister's palm, trying to make her smile. Such resilience in one so young, such trust blooming despite all they'd endured. Jonas flicked the reins gently, turning his team toward home. He had no idea how to be a father, especially to two traumatized little girls. But he knew with bone-deep certainty that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of that trust. The wagon rolled slowly out of town as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Behind them, the empty safe stood open in the alley, its dark interior no longer a prison, but a testament to survival, to hope, to the mysterious ways that family could be born from the most unexpected circumstances. Jonas listened to the soft murmur of twin voices in the wagon bed, speaking their own private language of comfort and love. His hands were steady on the reins, but his heart trembled with the weight of this new responsibility. These little ones needed him, and he found that he needed them too, more than he'd realized was possible. The mountain road stretched ahead leading home, not just his home anymore, but theirs. Together they would make something new from the broken pieces of their past. Jonas breathed a quiet prayer of thanks as they left the town behind, knowing that sometimes the greatest treasures came in the most unexpected packages, and that love could bloom even in the rusty heart of an old iron safe. Jonas gently lifted the girls from the safe, their tiny bodies trembling against him. They weighed no more than newborn lambs, all sharp angles and hollow spaces where childhood's softness should have been. With careful movements, he settled them onto the wagon bench, noting how they pressed together like frightened doves. "Miriam," the older one whispered again, her voice scratchy from thirst. She kept one protective arm around her sister. "Ava," the smaller girl echoed, fingers clutching her sister's ragged dress. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the alley as Jonas studied their condition. Their lips were cracked and pale, bodies wrapped in what looked like torn bed linens. His heart ached at the sight. These children needed food and proper care right quick. "Stay here a moment," he said softly, making sure they were steady on the bench. "I'm going to get you something to eat." Their eyes followed his every move as he stepped away, but they didn't make a sound. Jonas hurried to the mercantile, his mind racing. The bell above the door jangled as he entered, drawing curious looks from the shopkeeper and the few customers inside. "Need some fresh bread," Jonas said, keeping his voice steady. "And milk if you've got any cold." Mr. Turner, the shopkeeper, raised his eyebrows but gathered the items without comment. Jonas paid quickly, tucking the purchases into his coat. As he turned to leave, he noticed a cluster of townspeople gathering outside the store windows, pointing and whispering. Word was spreading fast about his unusual auction purchase. Back at the wagon, Jonas broke the bread into small pieces, soft enough for the girls to manage. He held the milk bottle carefully, letting each child take small sips. Their eyes grew wider with each swallow, as if they couldn't quite believe the simple meal was real. "Easy now," he murmured when Ava tried to grab for more bread. "Not too fast. There's plenty more where that came from." The crowd around them grew, their whispers carrying on the dusty air. Jonas heard fragments of conversation, speculation about where the children came from, dark mutterings about their presence in their proper white folks' town. He kept his focus on the girls, speaking quietly as they ate. Heavy boots scraped against wooden planks and a shadow fell across the wagon. Jonas looked up to find Sheriff Harlan Pike standing there, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. The sheriff's weathered face was set in hard lines, his pale eyes cold. "Care to explain what you're doing with those pickaninnies, Hale?" Pike demanded, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Jonas straightened slowly, positioning himself between the sheriff and the children. "Found them in that safe I bought fair and square at auction," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They're half-starved and scared. I aim to help them." Pike's mouth twisted. "Now see here, Hale. There's proper channels for handling such situations. Need to turn them over for processing, get them placed somewhere suitable." His hand settled meaningfully on his gun belt. "Can't have you taking the law into your own hands." Behind Jonas, Miriam made a tiny sound of fear. He felt Ava's small fingers clutch at his coat. Without taking his eyes off the sheriff, Jonas replied, "These children need immediate care, not processing. I've got a warm cabin and plenty of food, that's all that matters right now." "That's not your decision to make," Pike growled. "I'm warning you." But Jonas was already turning away, gathering the reins. He settled himself on the wagon bench, the twins pressed against his sides. "Much obliged for your concern, Sheriff," he said quietly. "But we'll be heading home now." Pike's face darkened with anger, but Jonas didn't wait for another response. He clucked to his mule team, and the wagon rolled forward. The crowd parted reluctantly, their stares following as Jonas guided the wagon out of town. The road wound upward through the foothills, tall pines casting deep shadows in the purple evening light. Jonas kept the pace steady, mindful of his precious cargo. Neither girl spoke, but their rigid postures gradually softened as the town disappeared behind them. The gentle swaying of the wagon and the warmth of Jonas's presence soon lulled the exhausted children to sleep. First, Ava's head drooped against his arm. Then Miriam's eyes fluttered closed despite her visible struggle to stay alert. Jonas shifted carefully, supporting them so they wouldn't fall. Looking down at their sleeping faces, peaceful at last, he felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness. These little ones had been through so much already. Whatever their story, however they'd ended up in that safe, they deserved better than being processed by the likes of Pike. The sky deepened to indigo as Jonas's cabin came into view, a solid structure of squared logs nestled against the tree line. He'd built it himself after Sarah died, seeking solitude in the high country. Now its isolation seemed providential, a safe harbor for these unexpected guests. Jonas carried the sleeping girls inside, their slight weight a reminder of how vulnerable they were. He laid them gently on his bed while he worked, not wanting them to wake alone in a strange place. Moving quietly, he lit the oil lantern, its warm glow pushing back the gathering darkness. The iron stove still held banked coals from morning. Jonas built up the fire, setting a pot of broth to warm. He'd need to make a proper meal soon, but for tonight, the simple soup would do. While it heated, he gathered every quilt he owned, making soft beds near the hearth. When the broth was ready, Jonas reluctantly woke the children. They startled at first, eyes wide with fear, until they remembered where they were. He helped them sit up, speaking softly. "Just some soup for now," he said, holding out small cups of the warm liquid. "Tomorrow we'll have a proper breakfast." They drank carefully, their movements still uncertain but less desperate than before. When they'd finished, Jonas showed them the quilt beds he'd made up. "Time for sleep," he said. "You're safe here." The twins curled up together on the quilts, their dark heads touching, small hands clasped. Jonas added another log to the fire, then settled into his chair to watch over them. The lamplight cast soft shadows on their faces, so young and innocent despite all they'd endured. Unbidden memories of Sarah rose in his mind, her gentle hands, her loving heart. She would have known exactly what these children needed. She would have gathered them close without hesitation, would have filled this cabin with warmth and song. Jonas bowed his head, his whispered prayer barely stirring the quiet air. "Lord, I don't know why you've placed these little ones in my path. I'm not sure I'm fit for this task, but please, help me protect them. Help me be what they need." The fire crackled softly. Outside, a whippoorwill called into the gathering night. Jonas settled deeper into his chair, watching the steady rise and fall of twin breaths, wondering what tomorrow would bring, but knowing with certainty that he would face it with these children by his side. Dawn crept over the mountain, painting Jonas's cabin in soft golden light. He'd been awake for hours already, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast while the girls slept soundly on their quilt beds. The familiar motions of morning chores felt different now, weighted with new purpose. Jonas stirred the pot of cornmeal mush carefully, adding a pinch of salt. The warm, hearty smell filled the cabin. Behind him, he heard the rustle of quilts and quiet whispers as the twins began to stir. "Breakfast nearly ready," he said without turning, keeping his voice gentle. "Take your time waking up." He heard them sit up, their movement still hesitant in the unfamiliar space. When he glanced over his shoulder, they were watching him with wide eyes, pressed close together as always. Their small faces looked better already after a night of real sleep. Jonas spooned the steaming mush into 3 bowls, adding a drizzle of molasses to each. He set the bowls on the table, then pulled out the chairs. "Come on over," he invited, settling into his own seat. "It's good and warm." The girls approached cautiously, climbing onto the chairs. Their feet didn't reach the floor, and Jonas made a mental note to build them a step. Miriam picked up her spoon first, studying the food carefully before taking a tiny bite. Ava watched her sister, then followed suit. "Good girls," Jonas murmured approvingly. "Take it slow. There's plenty more." As they ate, the twins began to look around the cabin with growing curiosity. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the simple furnishings, the iron stove, the rough-hewn table, shelves lined with tools and supplies. Jonas's boots stood by the door, still dusty from yesterday's trip to town. After breakfast, while Jonas cleared the bowls, the girls slipped down from their chairs. They moved around the edges of the room, touching things tentatively, running fingers along the grain of wooden walls, peering at the row of hooks where Jonas's coat hung, studying the collection of carved animals on the mantel. "Those are mine," Jonas explained when he saw their interest in the carvings. "Made them myself, when the evenings get long." He picked up a small wooden bear, holding it out. "Would you like to see?" Ava reached for it first, her small face lighting with wonder as she traced the rough fur Jonas had carved into the wood. Miriam leaned in close, equally fascinated. For a moment, they looked like any children exploring something new, their fear temporarily forgotten. "Need to fetch some water," Jonas said after a while. "Would you like to help?" They followed him outside, blinking in the bright morning light. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by tall pines that whispered in the mountain breeze. A narrow path led down to the creek, where Jonas drew his water. He showed them how to carry the smallest bucket between them, their serious faces intent on the task. "Careful now," he cautioned as they navigated the path. "Watch your step." They had just finished filling the bucket when a horse's hooves thundered up the trail. The twins froze, their fingers tightening on the handle. Jonas straightened, positioning himself between the children and the approaching rider. Sheriff Pike emerged from the trees, his bay horse lathered from the hard ride up the mountain. His face was dark with anger as he reined to a stop. "Hail," he barked. "This has gone far enough. Those girls are coming with me." Jonas felt Miriam press against his leg, Ava close behind her. "Morning, Sheriff," he said calmly. "We're doing just fine here." "They're contraband, Hale. Property of the Memphis Belle before she burned and sank 3 weeks back." Pike's voice carried ugly satisfaction. "Got word from downriver about who owned them. Some gentleman who dealt in such trade even after the war ended. They want their property back." Jonas's hand clenched into a fist, but he kept his voice steady. "These children aren't property, Sheriff. They're human beings who need care and protection." "The law says different," Pike sneered, "and I aim to enforce it. Step aside." "No." Jonas's quiet refusal carried clearly in the morning air. "I won't let you take them." Pike's face reddened. "You're interfering with legal commerce, Hale. Could get yourself arrested." "Then arrest me," Jonas said, "but these girls stay here." They stood locked in silence for a long moment, the sheriff's hand hovering near his gun. But Jonas didn't move, and something in his steady gaze made Pike hesitate. Finally, the sheriff spat in the dirt. "This isn't over, Hale. I'll be back with papers and men enough to handle you." He yanked his horse around, spurring it roughly down the trail. Jonas waited until the hoofbeats faded before turning to the twins. They were trembling, tears tracking down Ava's cheeks. He knelt down, gathering them close. "Listen to me," he said softly. "You're safe here. I won't let anyone take you away. You understand? You're staying right here with me." They clung to him, their small bodies shaking. Jonas held them until the trembling eased, then helped them carry the water bucket back to the cabin. Inside, he barred the door firmly, checking the windows out of habit. The rest of the day passed quietly. Jonas kept the girls close, showing them how to sweep the floor and teaching them the names of his tools. They stayed near him constantly, speaking only in whispers to each other. But gradually, their rigid postures began to relax again. As evening approached, Jonas lit the lamp and settled at the table with his carving knife and a piece of pine wood. The familiar work soothed him, helping to ease the anger that had burned in his chest since Pike's visit. Without thinking, he began to hum an old hymn his father had loved, "Amazing Grace." The soft notes filled the cabin. Jonas was so focused on his carving that at first he didn't notice the thin voice joining his. But then Miriam's clear tone rose alongside his, matching the melody perfectly. He glanced up, careful not to stop humming. Miriam sat on her quilt, eyes half closed as she swayed slightly with the music. Then Ava's voice joined in, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. A giggle escaped her as she tried to match the notes, and the sound of her laughter seemed to break something open in the cabin's atmosphere. Jonas's hands stilled on his carving as he watched them. Ava giggled again, leaning against her sister, and even Miriam's serious face cracked into a smile. The lamp cast a warm glow over them all, and for the first time in years, the lonely cabin felt truly like a home. He thought of Sarah then, of how she'd filled their first home with song and laughter. The memory didn't bring the usual sharp pain. Instead, he felt a deep sense of rightness, as if she would have approved of these children bringing music back into his life. The twins continued humming, their voices growing more confident. Jonas picked up his carving again, adding his deeper tone to theirs. Outside, night was falling over the mountain, but inside the cabin, warmth and hope were taking root. The next 2 days settled into a gentle rhythm at Jonas's cabin. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and late summer wildflowers as he showed the twins the simple routines of his life. Each task became a quiet lesson in trust. "This here's old Jack," Jonas said, leading the girls to the corrals where his mule dozed in the morning sun. He held out a handful of oats. "Come on, he's gentle as can be." Miriam stepped forward first, her small hand steady as she offered the oats. Old Jack's whiskers tickled her palm, making her jump back with a startled laugh. Ava watched from behind her sister, then crept forward for her turn. "That's right," Jonas encouraged, "nice and easy." Soon, the girls were competing to see who could gather more oats for the mule, their initial fear forgotten in the joy of making a new friend. Jonas watched them, noting how Miriam's protective stance relaxed when Ava's giggles echoed across the yard. Later that morning, he taught them about kindling. See these small twigs? He demonstrated, gathering dry pine needles and thin branches. These catch fire quick, help the bigger logs burn. The twins followed him through the trees near the cabin, their arms soon full of carefully selected sticks. "Is this good?" Ava would ask, holding up each piece for inspection. "Just right," Jonas would answer, his heart warming at their earnest efforts to help. But nights proved harder. The dark hours brought memories the girls couldn't escape. That second night, Jonas woke to whimpers from their quilts by the hearth. Ava thrashed in her sleep, crying out for her mama. Miriam tried to comfort her, but tears streaked her own cheeks. Jonas knelt beside them, his voice gentle. "Hey now, you're safe here." He gathered them both into his lap, their small bodies trembling. "Let me tell you about Daniel in the lion's den." His deep voice filled the cabin as he recounted the familiar story. Daniel trusted God to protect him, even when he was scared. Those big lions couldn't harm him, because he wasn't alone. "Were the lions hungry?" Miriam whispered. "Mighty hungry," Jonas answered. "But God shut their mouths tight." "Like the safe door?" Ava asked sleepily. Jonas's throat tightened. "That's right, little one. God kept you safe too." He told more stories each time they woke: Noah's Ark, David and Goliath, Moses in the bulrushes. The familiar tales seemed to comfort them, and gradually their breathing would slow, their bodies relaxing back into sleep. On the third morning, Jonas decided they needed a change of scene. He hitched old Jack to the wagon and lifted the girls onto the seat beside him. "Where we going?" Miriam asked, clinging to his arm as the wagon lurched forward. "Just down to the meadow," Jonas assured them. "Got something special to show you." The trail wound through stands of aspen, their leaves shimmering gold in the morning light. As they emerged into a wide meadow, Jonas pulled old Jack to a halt and pointed. "Look there," he whispered. A family of deer grazed at the meadow's edge, a doe and 2 spotted fawns. The girls sat perfectly still, watching in wonder as the fawns pranced around their mother. "They're dancing," Ava breathed. "Just like you two," Jonas smiled. They stayed until the deer melted back into the forest, then turned for home. The girls seemed calmer after that, as if the peaceful scene had eased something in their spirits. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Jonas was showing the twins how to feed the chickens when hoofbeats approached. The girls darted behind him as a horse and rider emerged from the trees. But it was Clara Whitfield, the town's schoolteacher, her neat black riding skirt dusty from the trail. She carried a cloth-wrapped bundle and wore a look of quiet determination. "Mr. Hale," she greeted him, dismounting gracefully. "I hope you'll pardon the intrusion." Jonas helped her tie her horse. "No intrusion, Miss Whitfield, though it's a long ride up here." "I brought fresh bread," she said, unwrapping the still warm loaf, "and I wanted to see how you were managing." The twins peeked out from behind Jonas, drawn by the smell of bread. Clara knelt down, her smile gentle. "Hello there," she said softly. "I'm Miss Clara. I teach at the school in town." Miriam studied her carefully before whispering, "I'm Miriam, this is Ava." "Those are beautiful names," Clara replied. She looked up at Jonas. "Perhaps we could talk while they enjoy the bread?" Jonas nodded, leading her to the bench by the cabin door, while the girls settled on the steps with their treat. He told her everything, finding them in the safe, the sheriff's threats, their nightmares and slow progress toward trust. Clara listened intently, her hands folded in her lap. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You've done the right thing, Mr. Hale," she said firmly. "But these children need more than just safety. They need to be seen as who they are, precious souls, not property." Jonas frowned. "Town folks ain't exactly welcoming to their kind." "Some aren't," Clara agreed, "but others might surprise you. Bring them to church on Sunday. Let people see them as children, not contraband. It will be harder for the sheriff to act against them if the community knows them." Jonas watched the twins sharing their bread, heads bent together as they whispered and giggled. "Don't want to frighten them more." "They'll have you with them," Clara pointed out, "and me. I'll make sure Reverend Thompson knows to expect you." After she left, Jonas pondered her words. That evening, he pulled out Sarah's old sewing basket, unopened since her death. Inside, He found neat squares of fabric, saved for quilting she never got to finish. "Come here, girls," he called. "Let's see about making you proper dresses for Sunday." His fingers were clumsy with the needle, but he remembered watching Sarah sew. The simple patterns she'd used for her niece's clothes guided his attempts. The twins stood patiently for measurements, fascinated by the process. "Mama used to sew," Miriam said softly, touching a scrap of blue calico. Jonas paused in his work. "Did she now?" "She made us matching dresses," Ava added, "with little flowers." "Well then," Jonas said, his voice rough, "we'll make these special too." He worked late into the night, his hands cramping around the needle. The results weren't pretty. The seams wandered, and the hems hung slightly crooked. But when the girls tried them on the next morning, their faces glowed. They twirled before the fireplace, the simple dresses flaring out. Ava's giggles filled the cabin as she spun until she was dizzy. Even Miriam smiled, running her hands over the soft fabric. Jonas watched them, his heart full. These moments of joy seemed to chase away the shadows of their past, filling his lonely cabin with light. He thought of Clara's words about letting others see them as they truly were. Not frightened refugees, but bright spirits worthy of love and protection. The girls danced until they were breathless, then climbed into his lap for their nightly Bible story. As Jonas began to tell them about baby Moses found in the river, he realized his own guarded heart had opened wide enough to let these children in. Whatever came next, they were family now. Sunday dawned clear and cool, with dew sparkling on the grass around Jonas's cabin. He rose before the sun, stoking the fire and heating water for baths. The girls still slept, curled together beneath their quilts near the hearth. "Time to wake, little ones," he called softly. "Church day." Miriam stirred first, her eyes widening at the steaming washtub Jonas had dragged inside. Ava burrowed deeper under the quilts until her sister tugged her arm. "Come on now," Jonas encouraged. "Let's get you cleaned up proper." He had Sarah's old cake of lavender soap saved all these years in the cupboard. The girls giggled as he helped them scrub, the sweet scent filling the cabin. Their hair he combed careful and slow, working out tangles with gentle fingers. "My neck's all scratchy," Ava complained as Jonas fastened the collar of her new dress. "That's what comes of being proper," he told her, smoothing the fabric. "You both look real fine." And they did. The dresses might be simple, but they transformed the girls from frightened waifs to proper little ladies. Jonas had pressed them carefully the night before, determined they should look their best. His own preparations took longer than usual. He trimmed his beard neat and close, then tackled the challenge of shaving his neck with his old straight razor. The looking glass showed a different man than usual. Clean shirt, pressed sharp, hair slicked back, boots polished to a shine. "You look like a picture book," Miriam declared, watching him knot his string tie. Jonas smiled. "Reckon that's good enough for church?" She nodded solemnly. "But your boots are dusty again." He let her polish them one more time while he hitched old Jack to the wagon. The morning air held autumn's bite, so he wrapped the girls in a warm blanket for the ride to town. The church sat on a small rise at the edge of town, its whitewashed boards gleaming in the morning sun. As Jonas helped the twins down from the wagon, he could see faces pressing against the windows, could hear the buzz of whispered conversations. "Remember what we talked about," he murmured, taking their hands. "You just hold tight to me and be brave." The girls pressed close against his legs as they climbed the wooden steps. Jonas paused at the door, drawing a deep breath. Then he pushed it open. The usual pre-service chatter died immediately. Every head turned, every eye fixed on Jonas and the two small figures clutching his hands. The silence felt thick enough to cut. Reverend Thompson stood frozen at the pulpit, his welcome dying on his lips as he took in the unexpected arrivals. Jonas met his gaze steadily, chin lifted. After what felt like an eternity, the preacher cleared his throat. "Welcome, Brother Jonas," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church. "We're glad to have you and your charges join us this morning." Jonas nodded gravely and guided the girls to an empty pew near the back. He could feel the stares, hear the murmurs. Some faces showed open hostility, others confusion or curiosity. Clara Whitfield, seated across the aisle, gave him an encouraging smile. "Please turn to hymn number 123, Reverend Thompson announced, breaking the tension. "Sweet hour of prayer." The organ wheezed to life and the congregation rose. Jonas found the page, holding the hymnal where both girls could see. They knew this one. They'd practiced it all week at home. The first verse began, voices lifting in familiar harmony. Miriam and Ava stayed silent at first, pressing closer to Jonas's sides. But as the second verse started, he heard Miriam's clear voice join in, barely above a whisper. Ava followed, gaining courage from her sister. By the third verse, their sweet voices rose pure and strong above the congregation. The twins sang with the natural harmony of siblings, their faces lifted in genuine joy at the familiar words. Several heads turned, expressions softening at the sound. Jonas saw Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, wipe away a tear. Old Mr. Phillips, who'd scowled when they entered, now watched the girls with something like wonder. Even Reverend Thompson paused in his own singing to listen. The sheriff and his deputies lurked in the back corner, faces dark with displeasure. But for once, Jonas didn't care. Pride swelled in his chest as he listened to his girls sing, their voices filling the church with innocent praise. The rest of the service passed in a blur of prayers and scripture readings. The girls sat quietly, though Ava fidgeted during the longer prayers. Jonas kept a protective arm around them both. When the final amen sounded, Jonas prepared to make a quick exit. But Clara Whitfield had other plans. She marched straight up to their pew, speaking loudly enough for nearby congregants to hear. "Mr. Hale, the girls sang beautifully today," she declared. "I do hope you'll consider enrolling them in school soon. Every child deserves an education." Her words sparked immediate reaction. Mrs. Henderson hurried over to agree, while others gathered to argue. Soon, a heated discussion swirled around Jonas and the twins. "It ain't proper," someone muttered. "They're children of God, same as any," Clara shot back. "Who are we to deny them learning and care?" "The law's clear about such things," the sheriff interrupted, shouldering through the crowd. "These girls are still considered—" "They are considered under my protection," Jonas stated firmly, rising to his full height. "And Miss Whitfield is right. They deserve schooling same as any child." More voices joined the debate, some supporting Jonas, others the sheriff. The twins pressed closer to Jonas, overwhelmed by the noise and tension. He could feel them trembling. "That's enough for today," he announced, cutting through the argument. "Much obliged for the welcome, Reverend. We'll be heading home now." He guided the girls through the crowd and out into the sunlight. Clara followed them to the wagon. "You did well," she told him quietly. "People needed to see them as children, not property. It will make a difference." Jonas nodded, lifting the twins onto the wagon seat. "Reckon it might at that, though the sheriff ain't pleased." "Let me worry about the sheriff," Clara said with a determined smile. "You just keep caring for these little ones." The ride home was quiet, the girls tired from the morning's excitement. They leaned against Jonas's arms, dozing as old Jack plodded steadily toward the mountains. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the trail. "Did we do good, Papa?" Ava asked sleepily. Jonas's heart caught at the word Papa around the first time either girl had called him that. "You did real good, sweetheart. Real good." At home, he fixed a special supper, venison stew with dumplings floating on top. While it simmered, the girls shed their good dresses for everyday clothes and played chase around the cabin. Their laughter echoed off the walls, filling every corner with joy. Jonas stirred the stew and watched them play, marveling at how they'd transformed his quiet cabin. The loneliness that had driven him to these mountains seemed to lift a little more each day, replaced by something warmer and brighter. "Supper's ready," he called, ladling out 3 bowls. "Come wash up now." They gathered around his scarred table, heads bowed for grace. As Jonas gave thanks for the food, he added a silent prayer of gratitude for the unexpected family God had sent his way. The cabin might be humble, but it held more love now than he dared hope for since Sarah's death. The girls chattered about church as they ate, the organ music, the colored windows, the way their voices had soared during the hymns. Their eyes shone with pride at having done well, at having helped Jonas show the town their true worth. "Can we go again next Sunday?" Miriam asked hopefully. Jonas smiled, his heart full. "Reckon we can at that, little one, reckon we can." Dawn broke crisp and clear over the mountain peaks. Jonas stood at his cabin door, watching Miriam and Ava chase each other around the yard while he hitched old Jack to the wagon. Their giggles floated on the morning air, making him smile despite his concerns about heading into town. Time to go, girls, he called, adjusting his hat. We need flour and lamp oil before winter sets in proper. The twins scampered over, their worn dresses swishing around their ankles. Jonas lifted them onto the wagon seat, making sure they were settled before climbing up himself. He'd cleaned them up nice, combed their hair into neat braids, wanting to show the town these weren't wild children but proper little girls. Now remember, he said as old Jack plodded down the mountain trail, you stay close to me in town. There's some folks ain't friendly yet, but don't you pay them no mind. The girls nodded solemnly, pressed against his sides. They'd learned quick enough how some people looked at them, but Jonas meant to teach them to hold their heads high regardless. The morning sun was climbing when they rolled into town. Already heads turned and whispers followed their progress down the dusty main street. Jonas kept his expression neutral, nodding politely to those who met his eyes, ignoring the hostile glares from others. Outside the general store, a drunk slouched against a post, taking a long pull from a bottle wrapped in brown paper. His bloodshot eyes fixed on Jonas, helping the girls down from the wagon. Ain't right, the man slurred loud enough for all to hear. Them kind shouldn't. Jonas turned slowly, fixing the drunk with a steady stare that could have frozen hell itself. The words died in the man's throat. He looked away first, mumbling into his bottle. Come along, girls, Jonas said quietly, taking their hands. The shopkeeper's bell tinkled as they entered the store. Inside, Jonas helped the twins select penny candy while he gathered supplies: flour, lamp oil, coffee, and sugar. The shopkeeper's wife cooed over the girls despite her husband's disapproving frown, slipping them each an extra piece of horehound candy. Their next stop was the smithy to check on some repairs to Jonas's axe head. The familiar ring of hammer on anvil guided them down the alley. As they approached, a familiar figure straightened up from his work. Jonas, my friend, Henry Grayle called out, setting aside his hammer. The Ute Scout's dark eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. And who are these little ones? He came forward, wiping his hands on his leather apron. Jonas felt the girls shrink slightly behind his legs. Henry, these are my girls, Miriam and Ava, Jonas said. Girls, this here's my good friend Henry Gray Elk. We've done lots of scouting together in the high country. Henry knelt down to their level, his movements gentle and deliberate. I am honored to meet you, little sisters, he said softly. From his pocket, he drew 2 small braided tokens made of supple leather and bright beads. These are special charms, he explained, holding them out. They will help you dream good dreams and keep bad spirits away. Miriam reached out first, touching the colorful token with wondering fingers. Ava followed, a shy smile breaking across her face as Henry placed the gifts in their small hands. What do we say? Jonas prompted. Thank you, they chorused softly. The pleasure is mine, Henry replied, rising. He met Jonas's eyes. Perhaps we could share coffee at Ma Benson's boarding house? I sense there is much to discuss. Jonas nodded. Girls, would you like some milk and maybe a biscuit? Their eager nods made both men smile. Ma Benson's boarding house was quiet this time of morning, the breakfast crowd long gone. She fussed over the twins, bringing them fresh milk and warm biscuits with honey while Jonas and Henry settled at a corner table with coffee. In low tones, Jonas related the whole story, finding the girls in the safe, the sheriff's threats, the growing tension in town. Henry listened intently, his dark eyes serious. You have chosen a difficult path, my friend, he said when Jonas finished. But it is the right one. Among my people, orphaned children are sacred. They belong to the whole tribe, and all must protect them. He leaned forward. You're not alone in this. I will stand with you. Jonas felt something tight in his chest ease. Much obliged, Henry. These girls, they've brought something back to life in me I thought was long dead. I aim to give them a proper home, no matter what anyone says. Then we will make it so, Henry said simply. He glanced at the twins who were giggling over their milk mustaches. They need an uncle to teach them the old ways, I think. If you permit? Couldn't ask for a better one, Jonas replied, gripping his friend's hand. The rest of their errands passed quickly. Having Henry beside them seemed to discourage the worst of the hostile looks. By early afternoon, they were headed back up the mountain, the wagon loaded with supplies. That evening, Jonas sat at his workbench, carefully carving a small wooden horse while the girls played quietly by the hearth. His knife moved surely over the pine, shaping delicate legs and a flowing mane. He'd always been good with his hands, and something about crafting this gift for his girls filled him with quiet joy. A knock at the door made them all look up. Henry stood in the doorway, carrying a bundle of long grasses and reeds. "I thought perhaps the little ones might like to learn some braiding," he said, settling cross-legged by the fire, "and maybe some songs from the summer camps." The girls needed no encouragement. Soon they were seated beside Henry, their small fingers learning to weave the grasses into simple plaits while he taught them a playful counting song in his language. Their attempts to wrap their tongues around the unfamiliar words had them all laughing. Jonas set aside his carving to watch, heart full. Henry's deep voice guided the girls through the song again, their sweet voices joining his. The cabin rang with their laughter when they tangled the words. As the evening deepened, the girls grew sleepy. Jonas carried them to their bed, tucking them in carefully. He placed the finished wooden horse on their small bedside table, where they would find it in the morning. "Papa," Ava murmured as she drifted off. Miriam echoed her sister, snuggling deeper under the quilts. "Papa." Jonas stood very still, emotion thick in his throat. Henry came to stand beside him, watching the sleeping children. "They have chosen you as much as you chose them," he said softly. "The Great Spirit works in mysterious ways, my friend." Jonas could only nod, watching his daughters sleep. The word Papa echoed in his heart, filling empty spaces he hadn't known were there. Whatever came, he would protect these precious souls Providence had entrusted to him. Henry squeezed his shoulder before taking his leave, promising to return soon. Jonas banked the fire for the night, his movements quiet so as not to disturb the girls. Their peaceful breathing filled the cabin, replacing the lonely silence that had haunted it for so long. The mountain seasons turned gentle as spring melted into early summer. Life at Jonas's cabin settled into comfortable rhythms, each day bringing new discoveries for the girls and fresh joy to their unlikely family. One crisp morning, Jonas led Miriam and Ava to the small barn where he kept his milk goat, Bessie. The girls hung back, eyeing the creature's curved horns with uncertainty. "Now don't you fret," Jonas said, patting the goat's spotted flank. "Bessie here's got a sweet temper, long as you treat her kind." He demonstrated how to approach from the side, speaking soft and easy. Miriam stepped forward first as she usually did. Her small hand reached out to touch Bessie's coarse fur. The goat turned her head, sniffing curiously, making Miriam giggle. "That's the way," Jonas encouraged. "Ava, you want to try?" Ava crept closer, clinging to her sister's dress. But soon, both girls were stroking Bessie, their initial fear forgotten. "Now watch close," Jonas said, settling onto the milking stool. His big hands worked with surprising gentleness, showing them how to grip and pull just so. The steady stream of milk pinged against the tin pail. "Can I try?" Miriam asked. "Of course you can." Jonas helped position her small hands like this, see? Nice and easy. It took several attempts before she managed a thin stream of milk. Her face lit up with pride. "I did it." "Ava, you try." Soon both girls were taking turns, more milk splashing on their aprons than in the pail. But Jonas didn't mind. Their laughter filled the cool morning air. Later that same day, Henry arrived carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. The girls ran to greet him, calling Uncle Henry, a name that had come naturally over the weeks. "Look here," he said, kneeling to unwrap his package. Inside were vegetables from his garden, carrots, turnips, and early summer squash. Time you learned to prepare food in the old way. He showed them how to arrange the vegetables on the rough wooden table, demonstrating how to hold the knife safely. "First, we give thanks for the earth's gifts," he explained. "Then we cut with respect, wasting nothing." Jonas watched from his chair by the fire, whittling a new spoon, as Henry guided their small hands. The girls' faces scrunched in concentration as they carefully chopped the vegetables into uneven chunks. "Very good," Henry praised. "Now we will make soup that will warm both body and spirit." The next morning brought fresh snow, unusual for early summer but not unheard of in the high country. Henry had stayed the night, sleeping near the hearth, and helped Jonas track bird prints with the girls after breakfast. "See here?" Henry pointed to delicate marks in the powder. "These are from a blue jay. Count the toes. 1, 2, 3 in front, 1 in back." The twins bent close, their breath making tiny clouds in the cold air. They followed the tracks to where the bird had hopped between pine seedlings, searching for seeds. "And these?" Ava pointed to different prints. Those belong to a snow bunny," Henry explained. "See how the back feet land in front of the front feet? That's how they hop." The lesson was cut short as heavy clouds rolled in, bringing more snow. They hurried back to the cabin just as the storm hit in earnest. For 3 days, the blizzard howled around them, the wind finding every crack in the log walls. But inside, the cabin was warm and bright. Clara had arrived just before the storm, bringing primers and slates for the girls' lessons, and found herself storm-stayed with them. They passed the time pleasantly enough. Clara taught the girls their letters, praising their careful attempts to copy the alphabet. Henry shared stories of his people, speaking of wise animals and brave children. Jonas kept the fire well-fed and told tales of his own childhood back east. On the second night, as lamplight cast dancing shadows, Jonas began the story of David and Goliath. The girls were especially taken with this one, acting it out with great enthusiasm. Miriam played David, wielding an imaginary sling, while Ava stomped around as Goliath until she collapsed in a fit of giggles. "Again, Papa. Tell it again," they begged. Jonas obliged, watching their dramatic interpretation grow more elaborate with each retelling. Clara caught his eye, smiling at their antics, while Henry added sound effects that sent the girls into fresh peals of laughter. When the storm finally broke, leaving the world draped in white, Clara brought up what had clearly been on her mind. "The girls need proper schooling, Jonas," she said firmly. "They're quick learners. It would be a shame to waste their potential." Jonas frowned, knowing the challenges they'd face, and some folks won't take kindly to it. "Some folks never take kindly to what's right," Clara replied, her chin lifting. "But these children deserve an education same as any other. I'll stand by that before God and man alike." And so, when the snow melted enough for travel, Jonas brought the girls to town. They wore their best dresses, faces scrubbed clean, hair neatly braided. Clara met them at the schoolhouse door, her warm smile a shield against the suspicious stares of other parents. "Welcome to school, girls," she said, leading them inside where other children already sat at their desks. Some parents pulled their children close, muttering darkly. Jonas felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. The girls needed to see him calm and steady. "Got every right to be here," he said quietly but firmly to no one in particular. "Law says every child gets schooling." Clara backed him up, her voice carrying clear authority despite her gentle demeanor. "These girls are my students now. They'll be treated with the same respect as any other child in my classroom." The grumbling continued, but no one dared challenge Clara directly. She was too well respected in the community, her position as teacher too vital to the town's future. Jonas had just finished settling the girls at their desk when heavy boots sounded on the schoolhouse steps. The sheriff appeared in the doorway, a deputy hovering behind him. "Need a word, Hale," Pike said, jerking his head toward the door. Outside, the sheriff's face was hard. "Federal marshals are on their way," he said without preamble. "Seems them girls are considered valuable property by certain parties back east. There's good money in returning them." He paused significantly. "Could be worth your while to cooperate." Jonas felt ice form in his chest, but his voice came out steady. "Those children aren't property. They're human beings under my protection. Don't be a fool, Hale. Way I hear it, there's $500 in it for anyone helps recover them." The sheriff's eyes were cold. "Or there's trouble heading your way. Choice is yours." "Already made my choice," Jonas said. "Now get off my land." "This ain't your land. It's public school ground." "Then get away from my girls." Jonas's hand didn't move toward his gun, but the suggestion was there in his stance. The sheriff's lip curled, but he stepped back. "Have it your way. Don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and walked away, his deputy scurrying after. That evening, as Jonas tucked the girls into bed, Miriam's small voice stopped him. "Papa?" She clutched her quilt tight. "Are they going to take us away?" Jonas knelt beside the bed, taking both their hands in his. In the lamplight, their eyes were huge with worry. His heart clenched, but his voice stayed firm and sure. "Listen to me, both of you," he said. "You're my daughters now. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Not while I draw breath. You understand?" They nodded, but Ava still looked uncertain. "Promise?" "I promise." He kissed their foreheads. "Now sleep peaceful. Uncle Henry's coming tomorrow to teach you more tracking, and you'll need your rest." He stayed beside them until their breathing deepened into sleep, watching their small faces relax. The setting sun painted the cabin walls golden through the window, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called. Jonas stood slowly, muscles aching from the long day, but his jaw was set with determination. He'd meant every word. No one would take these precious girls from him. Not the sheriff, not federal marshals, not anyone. Whatever came, they would face it together as a family. The schoolhouse bell rang clear across the morning air as Jonas helped Miriam and Ava down from the wagon. Their slates clattered together, carefully wrapped in cloth to protect them. The girls had polished them to a shine the night before, eager for their second week of lessons. "Remember what we practiced?" Jonas asked, straightening Ava's collar. "Yes, Papa," they chorused, reciting their letters one more time. Through the open door, Jonas could see Clara arranging books on her desk, her face brightening as she spotted them. Other children filtered in, some casting suspicious glances at the twins. Jonas's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression calm. "Head on in now," he said softly. "Miss Whitfield's waiting." The girls clutched their slates and stepped through the doorway. Jonas lingered, watching through the open door as they found their seats. Clara had placed them near the front where she could keep a watchful eye. The trouble started during the morning lesson. While Clara wrote numbers on the large slate, a boy 2 rows back began flicking bits of paper at Miriam's head. His sister joined in, whispering words that made both twins hunch their shoulders. "Look at their hair," the girl sneered just loud enough to carry. "All woolly like sheep." Jonas's hands clenched on the doorframe, but before he could step in, Clara's chalk stopped mid-stroke. She turned, her normally gentle face stern. "Thomas and Sarah Miller," she said, voice cutting through the whispers. "Come to the front bench this instant." The siblings slouched forward, Thomas dragging his feet. "In this classroom, we treat all God's children with respect," Clara declared, addressing the whole room. "Anyone who cannot manage that basic Christian courtesy will sit right here under my nose until they learn better manners." She pointed to the front bench directly beneath her desk. "Now sit." The Millers sat, faces red. Clara's expression softened as she turned back to Miriam and Ava. "Now then, girls, would you like to show the class how well you've learned your numbers?" Miriam stood first, chin lifting. In a clear voice, she counted to 20 without hesitation. Ava followed, matching her sister's achievement. Clara beamed. "Very good. You see, children, we all learn better when we help each other instead of being unkind." Jonas felt pride swell in his chest as the twins returned to their work, backs straight and heads high. They bent over their slates, carefully copying letters with their chalk, completely focused on their task. He waited until Clara gave him a slight nod, confirming she had matters well in hand, before heading into town for supplies. The general store was busy with morning trade when he entered. "Need flour and coffee," he told the shopkeeper, trying to ignore the way conversation died when he approached the counter. As he waited for his order, 2 men entered the store. Jonas recognized them as traders who sometimes passed through, though he'd never learned their names. They stopped near the tobacco barrel, speaking in low voices that nonetheless carried in the quiet shop. "Sure it's them," the taller one was saying. "Cargo manifest listed 2 girls, right age." "Has to be," his companion replied. "Sheriff Pike confirmed it. Says that mountain man bought the safe they was hid in, direct from the riverboat salvage. Valuable cargo that, owners will pay good to get it back. Pike's already taken care of, $500 to look the other way when we collect." Jonas kept his face carefully blank as fury rose in his throat. His fingers itched to grab both men and throw them bodily from the store. But violence would only give the sheriff excuse to arrest him, leaving the girls unprotected. Instead, he paid for his supplies with steady hands and walked out, forcing himself not to hurry. Only when he was sure no one followed did he cut through back alleys to reach his wagon. He found Henry Gray Elk waiting by the schoolhouse, wearing the expression that had made him such a valuable scout during the war. "Trouble coming?" Henry said without preamble. "Saw strange tracks near your cabin this morning. Men watching from the ridge." Jonas nodded grimly. "Heard 2 fellows in town talking about claiming the girls as cargo from the riverboat. Sheriff's been bought." Henry's face hardened. "Children are not cargo." "No, they ain't." Jonas glanced through the schoolhouse window where Miriam and Ava sat absorbed in their lessons. But these men don't see children. They see profit. Then we must open their eyes, Henry said, or close them permanently. Rather avoid bloodshed if we can, Jonas replied, for the girl's sake. But I aim to be ready if it comes to that. When lessons ended, Jonas wasted no time getting the twins home. He took a longer route, watching for followers, while Henry rode ahead to check the trail was clear. The cabin looked peaceful in the afternoon light, but Jonas's eyes caught the signs Henry had mentioned. Boot prints in the soft earth by the creek, a branch broken on the ridge where someone had laid watching. Inside, he double-checked every window latch and door lock. His rifle, always kept loaded, went by the bed within easy reach. Henry rode out to scout the surrounding area but promised to return before dark. The girls sensed the tension in the air. They stayed close as Jonas prepared supper, jumping at small sounds. When night fell, they crawled into his lap as he sat in his chair by the fire. "Papa," Miriam whispered, "are the bad men coming?" Jonas stroked their hair, remembering the cruel words in the store. "Some men might try to cause trouble," he said carefully. "But you don't need to fear. Uncle Henry and I won't let anyone harm you." "Can we pray?" Ava asked in a small voice. "Of course we can, darling." The girls clasped their hands, reciting the prayer Clara had taught them in simple, trusting voices. Jonas added his own silent plea for strength and wisdom to protect these precious souls Providence had placed in his care. Henry returned as the moon rose, shaking his head at Jonas's questioning look. No immediate threat, but the watchers were still out there. He settled by the door with his own rifle, singing soft Ute lullabies until the twins drifted to sleep. Jonas tucked them into bed, his heart aching with the weight of responsibility. But as he watched their peaceful faces in the lamplight, that same weight forged his resolve into steel. These were his daughters now, his family. No piece of paper or cargo manifest could change that truth. He damped the fire and took first watch, Henry's quiet presence a comfort in the darkness. Outside, an owl called, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang to the moon. The cabin was an island of warmth in the vast night, sheltering the precious new life within its walls. Jonas touched the rifle at his side, praying he wouldn't need it but determined to use it if forced. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. And family, real family, chosen and cherished, was worth it everything. The morning sun painted long shadows across the market square as Jonas guided his wagon down the rutted street. Miriam and Ava sat between him and Henry Gray Elk, their eyes wide at the bustling crowd. Market day brought farmers and traders from miles around, filling the normally quiet town with noise and motion. "Remember what we talked about," Jonas said softly as he helped the girls down. "Stay close, and if anything worries you, just squeeze my hand." They nodded solemnly, each taking one of his rough hands in their small ones. Henry walked slightly behind, his quiet presence a shield against hostile stares. The market stalls formed a maze of canvas and wood, the autumn air rich with the smell of fresh bread and roasted corn. Jonas felt the girls' grip tighten as they passed the first cluster of townspeople. Whispers followed them like falling leaves. "Ain't right him keeping them. Heard they're stolen property. Should be with their own kind." Jonas kept his pace steady, though his jaw clenched. He'd expected the hostility, but it still burned to hear such poison spoken around innocent children. "Jonas," Clara Whitfield's clear voice cut through the murmurs. She stood by the fabric merchant's stall, waving cheerfully. "I was hoping to see you today." The school teacher's public greeting shifted the mood slightly. Few in town would risk openly opposing Clara, daughter of the former minister and respected voice of propriety. "Miss Clara?" Ava called back, her smile brightening. Both girls loved their teacher, and her presence always brought them comfort. Clara met them halfway, kneeling to embrace the twins. "My, don't you both look lovely today? And growing so fast, I suspect you'll need new dresses soon." "That's why we're here," Jonas said, nodding toward the fabric stall. "Winter's coming, and they need proper clothes." "Then you're in luck." Clara linked arms with the girls. "I happen to know exactly which fabrics will suit them best. Shall we look together?" Under Clara's guidance, they selected sturdy wool in deep blue for everyday wear, and softer cloth in forest green for Sunday best. The fabric merchant, initially stiff and unwelcoming, thawed somewhat under Clara's cheerful conversation and coin. "The green will bring out their eyes beautifully," she declared, holding the cloth against Miriam's cheek. "And the blue will wear well for school and chores." Jonas watched the girls stroke the fabrics with wondering fingers, his heart full. They'd come so far from the terrified children he'd found in that rusted safe. Now they smiled and even giggled as Clara discussed ribbons and buttons. Henry appeared at his shoulder, speaking low. "The sheriff's men are watching from the saloon." But more folks smile than frown today. Clara's friendship carries weight. Jonas nodded. He'd noticed the deputies too, but refused to let their surveillance spoil this moment of normal family life. They completed their purchases and loaded them carefully in the wagon. Clara promised to visit the next day to help with the sewing, having more skill with needle and thread than Jonas's rough hands could manage. The ride home was lighter than the journey in, the girls chattering about their new dresses. Even Henry smiled at their excitement, teaching them a Ute counting song to pass the time. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Clara arrived early, her sewing basket over one arm. While she settled at the table with her patterns and pins, Jonas took the twins outside to stack firewood for the coming winter. "Careful now," he cautioned as they carried small pieces to the growing pile. "Don't want splinters in those sewing fingers." They worked steadily, the girls proud to help. Their laughter drifted through the open cabin door, where Clara measured and cut with practiced ease. "Papa, look!" Miriam called, managing 3 sticks at once. "I'm strong like you." Jonas paused, axe half raised, throat suddenly tight. The simple word, "Papa," still caught him by surprise sometimes, filling his heart near to bursting. He remembered another time, years ago, when Sarah had sat at her sewing frame while he split wood. His wife's gentle hands had created beauty from simple cloth, just as Clara did now. The memory brought an ache, but also gratitude. Perhaps Sarah's spirit had guided him to these children, knowing his lonely heart needed healing. By afternoon, Clara had the first dress ready for fitting. The girls took turns standing on a stool while she pinned hems and adjusted seams. They giggled and swayed, playing at being fine ladies, until Clara laughingly ordered them to stand still. "You'll end up with crooked hems if you don't stop dancing," she scolded fondly, mouth full of pins. Jonas watched from his chair by the fire, whittling a new toy horse. The scene felt right somehow, the cabin warm with friendship and purpose instead of echoing with solitude. A knock at the door broke the peaceful moment. Before Jonas could rise, it swung open to reveal the widow Chen from the next homestead over, bearing a basket of fresh apples. "For the children," she said simply, setting them on the table. "From my old tree. Too many for one person anyway." Before Jonas could properly thank her, more neighbors arrived. The Hendersons brought a jar of honey from their hives. Old Man Cooper offered a sack of late corn, gruffly explaining his wife insisted. Even the Millers, whose children had taunted the twins at school, stopped by with a loaf of fresh bread. Each visitor looked somewhat awkward, as if unsure of their welcome, but each also took time to greet the girls properly. They admired the new dresses, commented on how well the twins were growing, spoke of weather and crops and ordinary things. Jonas felt hope rising. Perhaps the community's heart was softening. Perhaps they were beginning to see past prejudice to the simple truth. These were just children, deserving love and protection like any others. The peace shattered with the thunder of hoofbeats. A deputy's horse slid to a stop outside, kicking up dust. The rider, young Deputy Wilson, looked uncomfortable as he dismounted. "Mr. Hale," he said, touching his hat, "got papers for you." The deputy pulled an official-looking document from his vest, holding it out. Jonas took it slowly, dread settling in his stomach as he read the formal words. "Notice is hereby given federal marshals, wards of the state, removal within 3 days." His hands began to shake. The paper crackled as his fingers tightened. "I'm sorry," Wilson said quietly. "Sheriff wanted you to have warning. Marshals are coming from Denver. They'll be here by week's end." The deputy mounted up and rode away, leaving silence in his wake. The neighbors who remained slipped out quietly, murmuring awkward goodbyes. Only Clara and Henry stayed, watching Jonas with concern as he stared at the paper. The fire popped and hissed, throwing dancing shadows on the cabin walls. "Papa?" Ava's small voice quavered. "What's wrong?" Jonas looked up to find both girls watching him, their eyes wide with fear. They stood frozen in their half-pinned dresses, Clara's needle suspended mid-stitch. "Come here, little ones," he managed, holding out his arms. They ran to him, burying their faces against his chest. He held them close, breathing in the clean scent of their hair, feeling their small hearts beating against his own. The paper lay forgotten on the floor, but its words burned in his mind. 3 days. 3 days until strangers would try to take his daughters away. 3 days to somehow prevent his family from being torn apart. The fire crackled in the hearth, marking time's steady march forward. Outside, the sun began its slow descent toward the mountains, painting the world in autumn gold. But inside the cabin, the fragile peace they'd built together hung by a thread, threatened by the cold weight of official paper and government seals. The first hint of dawn crept across the sky in muted grays, bringing with it a biting autumn chill. Jonas stood at his cabin window, watching shadows slowly separate from darkness. Behind him, Miriam and Ava slept peacefully in their shared bed, unaware of the weight pressing down on their father's shoulders. He moved quietly through the cabin, gathering essentials: dried meat, hard bread, warm blankets. His hands paused over each item, mind racing with calculations. How far could they travel? How long could they survive in the high country? The mountains offered shelter, but winter approached fast. The crunch of hooves on frost-covered ground made him stiffen. Reaching for his rifle, Jonas eased open the door to find Henry Gray Elk dismounting in the yard. "Brother," Henry said softly, his breath visible in the cold air. "I see you plan to run." Jonas gestured at the supplies laid out on the table. "Seems the only way. Can't let them take my girls." Henry's dark eyes held understanding, but he shook his head. "Running marks you criminal. Makes it worse, not better. They'll hunt you harder then." "What choice do I have?" Jonas's voice cracked with desperation. "There may be another way." Clara Whitfield's voice came from behind them. She sat her horse at the edge of the yard, her cloak drawn tight against the morning chill. Jonas hadn't heard her approach. "Miss Whitfield, what brings you out so early?" "The same thing that keeps you awake, finding a way to protect those children." She dismounted gracefully, gathering her skirts. "The law that threatens can also shield, if we're clever enough to use it right." Henry nodded slowly. "She speaks wisdom. Better to fight with paper than bullets." Clara stepped into the cabin, her eyes falling on the sleeping girls. "We need to search the town records. That auction where you bought the safe. There must be documentation. The receipt's here somewhere." Jonas began rifling through a wooden box of papers. "But how will that help?" "The law runs on paper," Clara explained. "Every transaction leaves a trail, if we can prove your legal claim." She paused as Jonas produced a crumpled document. The three gathered around the table, heads bent close over the auction receipt in the growing light. Clara's finger traced the formal language, stopping suddenly at one phrase. "Here." Her voice rose with excitement before she quickly lowered it. "One iron safe and contents included. See? The girls were legally part of your purchase." Jonas stared at the words, but surely they didn't mean. "Intent doesn't matter," Clara insisted. "The law works on what's written. You paid for that safe and everything in it. There are precedents for property claims being upheld based on exactly this kind of language." Henry's weathered face broke into a smile. "The very paper that would claim them as property now proves they belong with you. There is justice in that." The twins stirred at the voices, sitting up with sleepy eyes. "Papa?" Miriam called softly. "Here, little one." Jonas went to them, gathering both girls into his arms. "Just talking with Uncle Henry and Miss Clara." "Are the bad men coming?" Ava's small voice trembled. Jonas smoothed her hair. "Some men might come, yes. But we're going to show them papers that prove you belong right here with me." "Like our school papers?" Miriam asked, always quick to make connections. "Similar," Clara said, coming to sit beside them. "Papers that show your papa bought the safe you were in, fair and square. That makes you his, legally as well as in his heart." The girls seemed to consider this. "Can we pray about it?" Ava asked finally. "Like you taught us?" Jonas's throat tightened. "That's a fine idea, sweetheart. Let's do that right now." They knelt together beside the bed, the girl's small hands clasped in his larger ones. Early morning light filtered through the window, touching their bowed heads with gold. "Lord," Jonas began, his voice rough with emotion, "we come to you seeking wisdom and protection. These children you've placed in my care." "In my care," the twins echoed softly, their sweet voices intertwining with his deeper one. "Guide us through this trial, show us the path of righteousness, and give us strength to walk it." "Walk it," they repeated solemnly. "And if it be your will, keep this family together, bound by love stronger than any paper or law of man." "Amen," the girls finished firmly, having learned the proper ending to prayers. Clara wiped tears from her eyes while Henry stood respectfully by the door, his own head bowed. The quiet moment held them all in its grace. A horse's urgent whinny broke the silence. Henry slipped outside, returning moments later with tension in his shoulders. "Riders coming up from the valley," he reported, "moving fast. Must be the marshals. They've made better time than expected." Jonas rose swiftly, helping the girls to their feet. "How long?" "An hour, maybe less," and Henry's expression was grim. "They're pushing their horses hard." Clara gathered the important papers, the auction receipt, Jonas's bill of sale, even the girls' school records showing their progress. "We'll need these ready." Jonas moved with practiced efficiency, filling water buckets, stocking wood by the fire, laying out food within easy reach. His movements were calm and measured, but his heart pounded against his ribs. "Girls," he called softly, "come here a moment." They came to him, faces solemn. He knelt to their level, meeting their eyes directly. "Some men are coming to talk to me about you. They might not be friendly at first, but I need you to be brave and quiet, no matter what happens. Can you do that for me?" They nodded, pressing close to his sides. "Remember what we've talked about. You're my daughters now, and nothing will change that. Even if these men are scary, even if they say different things, you remember that. All right?" "Yes, Papa," they whispered together. Henry appeared in the doorway again, dust on the trail. "They're coming." Jonas straightened, squaring his shoulders. Clara arranged the papers carefully on the table while Henry took up position near the window, his presence solid and reassuring. "Whatever comes," Henry said quietly, "you don't stand alone, brother." Clara nodded firmly. "We'll face this together with law and right on our side." The sound of approaching horses grew louder. Jonas gathered his daughters close one more time, breathing in their familiar scent, feeling their small hearts beating against him. Then he gently seated them by the fire with their slate and chalk. "Practice your letters now," he said steadily. "Show these men how well you're learning." The girls bent obediently to their task as heavy boots sounded on the porch outside. Jonas moved to the door, hand steady on the latch, ready to meet whatever came. Behind him, Clara stood straight and dignified, the precious papers in hand. Henry's quiet strength filled one corner, while the twins' soft whispers and chalk scratching provided a gentle counterpoint to the harsh knocking that suddenly echoed through the cabin. The moment of confrontation had arrived. Jonas took one deep breath, sent up a silent prayer, and reached for the door. 3 riders appeared through the morning mist, their horses' hooves kicking up dust from the hard-packed earth. The lead marshal, a tall man with iron-gray hair and a weathered face, sat straight in his saddle. Behind him rode 2 younger deputies, their badges glinting in the weak sunlight. Sheriff Pike brought up the rear, a satisfied smirk playing across his features. Jonas stood in his cabin doorway, his Winchester rifle held loosely at his side, its muzzle pointed safely toward the ground. The wooden boards creaked beneath his boots as he shifted his weight, watching the approaching lawmen with steady eyes. Behind him, he could hear Miriam and Ava's soft breathing as they huddled near the hearth. Clara Whitfield stood to his right, her spine straight as a fence post, clutching the precious auction papers. Henry Gray Elk maintained his position to Jonas's left, his presence solid and reassuring as mountain stone. The sound of more horses and wagons drifted up from the trail. Townsfolk were gathering at a cautious distance, drawn by word of the confrontation. Their whispered conversations carried on the morning air. "That's close enough," Jonas called out when the riders were 20 paces from his door. The lead marshal reined his horse to a stop, studying the scene before him. His gaze took in Jonas's stance, the rifle, and the 2 steady companions at his side. After a moment, he swung down from his saddle, boot striking dirt with authority. "Jonas Hale?" The marshal's voice was deep, official. "I'm Federal Marshal Daniel Webster. I have orders regarding 2 minor children reportedly in your possession. These children are my daughters, Jonas replied evenly, and they're not going anywhere. Sheriff Pike spurred his horse forward. Now see here, Hale. You've had your fun playing nursemaid, but these girls are contraband from that riverboat wreck, property of Dash. They are not property, Clara cut in, her voice sharp as a new blade. They are children under legal guardianship. The marshal pulled a folded document from his coat. I have federal orders to take custody of 2 colored children, ages approximately 4 years, discovered in your possession without proper documentation of guardianship. I have documentation right here. Jonas nodded to Clara, who stepped forward with the auction papers. These children were legally purchased as contents of that safe, fair, and square at public auction. I have witnesses and a signed bill of sale. The marshal frowned, clearly not expecting this development. He began reading through the papers Clara presented, his weathered brow furrowed in concentration. Inside the cabin, a small voice started humming a hymn tune. The sound drifted out through the open door, pure and sweet in the tense morning air. Several of the watching townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. This is nonsense, Sheriff Pike burst out. You can't claim people as property anymore, Hale. The war settled that. Exactly right, Jonas agreed, his voice firm. Which is why these girls are my daughters, not property. And I'm demanding a proper hearing before any attempt to separate my family. The 2 younger deputies exchanged uncertain glances. The gathering crowd had grown larger, with more wagons arriving. Clara's presence lent an air of respectability to Jonas's side, while Henry's quiet dignity spoke to the deeper justice of his cause. The law requires due process, Clara added, her schoolteacher's voice carrying clearly. These children have been attending my school, making excellent progress. They have a stable home, a loving father. You cannot simply tear them away without proper legal proceedings. Marshal Webster looked from the papers to the crowd and back again. His jaw worked as he considered the situation. Where are these children now? We're here, sir, came Miriam's clear voice. She and Ava appeared in the doorway, pressing close to Jonas's legs. They wore clean dresses, their hair neatly braided, looking every bit the proper schoolgirls. Papa takes good care of us. Several women in the crowd made soft sounds of sympathy. Even one of the deputies removed his hat, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of dragging small children away from their home. This needs to be settled now, Sheriff Pike insisted, his face reddening. You can't let him delay. The law is the law, Marshal Webster cut him off. If there's a legitimate claim of guardianship, it needs to be properly heard. He turned to Jonas. The circuit judge arrives day after tomorrow. I'll grant a stay until then, pending his ruling on this matter. This is ridiculous, Pike spluttered. I know for a fact there are interested parties. Who paid you to say that, Sheriff? Henry's quiet question carried unexpected weight. Pike's mouth snapped shut, his face darkening further. 2 days, Marshal Webster declared firmly. We'll return with the judge. Until then, these children remain here, but you're responsible for ensuring they don't disappear, Hale. They'll be here, Jonas promised. We'll all be here. The marshal nodded, tucking the papers into his coat. He turned to remount his horse, then paused. Those girls singing we heard. That was mighty pretty. They know their hymns, Clara said proudly. Top marks in school, too. Something softened briefly in the marshal's weathered face before he swung into his saddle. With a touch of his hat brim, he wheeled his horse around. The deputies followed, leaving Sheriff Pike sitting alone before the cabin. This ain't over, Hale, Pike growled, and not by a long shot. Right on, Sheriff, Henry suggested mildly. Your business here is finished for today. With a last glare, Pike yanked his horse's head around and spurred away. The watching townsfolk began to disperse, their wagons creaking back down the trail. Several nodded to Jonas as they left, a few even touching their hats in respect. Once the yard was clear, Jonas's shoulders sagged slightly. He set his rifle carefully against the wall and gathered both girls into his arms, holding them close. You were so brave, he murmured into their hair. So brave and good. Are they coming back? Ava asked in a small voice. Yes, sweetie, but not for 2 whole days, and when they do, we'll show them all our papers and prove that you belong right here with me. Clara touched his shoulder gently. I'll help prepare your case for the judge. We'll gather testimonies from church members, school records, Everything we can. And I will speak of how the children thrive here, Henry added. The judge should hear from all sides of our community. Jonas nodded gratefully to his friends. Much obliged, both of you. I don't know how to repay. Family stands together, Henry said simply. No repayment needed. As afternoon faded toward evening, the cabin grew quiet. Clara had gone to gather supporting documents, while Henry rode out to spread word among his people about the coming hearing. Jonas sat in his chair by the fire, a well-worn Bible open on his knee. The girls nestled close on either side as he read familiar passages in his deep, steady voice. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The words brought comfort, but a heavy dread still hung in the air like storm clouds gathering. Jonas read on, his voice never wavering, though his heart ached with worry. When he finally closed the Bible, the girls were drooping with exhaustion. Time for bed, little ones, he said softly. Would you like a song first? They nodded eagerly, and Jonas began to sing an old lullaby his mother had taught him. His voice was rough but true, and the girls soon joined in, their sweet tones weaving around his deeper one. The familiar melody drove back the shadows of fear, if only for a moment. All through the night, guardian angels, God will send thee. Later, after the twins were asleep in their bed, Jonas sat alone by the dying fire. The Bible lay open in his lap, but his eyes were fixed on the darkness beyond the window. 2 days seemed both too long to bear and too short to prepare. He could only pray it would be enough time to save his family. Dawn painted the mountain peaks in rose gold as Jonas hitched the wagon. His movements were deliberate, checking each buckle twice. The morning air carried a bite of frost, warning that winter wasn't far off. He paused, watching his breath cloud in the cold, gathering his resolve for the day ahead. Clara arrived first, her buggy wheels crunching on the frosted ground. She carried a leather satchel stuffed with papers and wore her best teaching dress, determined to present a proper appearance. Henry rode up moments later on his painted pony, nodding gravely to them both. Inside the cabin, Mrs. Peterson, a widow from the next homestead over, sat with the twins at the table. She had agreed to watch them, understanding the importance of keeping them safe while Jonas gathered support. The girls picked at their breakfast, unusually quiet. We'll be back before sunset, Jonas promised, kneeling to embrace them. Mind Mrs. Peterson and stay close to the cabin. Miriam's small fingers clutched his coat. What if the bad men come back? They won't, not today, Jonas assured her, though his own heart tightened at the thought. Mrs. Peterson knows to send her boy running if anyone approaches. Henry's left 2 of his cousins watching the trail, too. Ava's bottom lip trembled. Don't go, Papa. Jonas gathered them both close, breathing in the clean scent of their hair. I have to, little ones. Have to make sure we can stay together. He pulled back, managing a smile. Maybe you could practice your letters while I'm gone? Show Mrs. Peterson how well you write? The girls nodded solemnly. Jonas stood, nodding thanks to Mrs. Peterson. The elderly woman's kind eyes met his. We'll be just fine here, she said firmly. You go do what needs doing. Outside, Clara had already climbed into the wagon beside Henry. Jonas took the reins, clicking to the mules. As they rolled down the trail, he glanced back to see the twins standing in the doorway, small hands raised in farewell. Their first stop was the auction house in town. The morning sun had barely cleared the buildings when they tied up outside. The auctioneer, Mr. Simmons, was already at his desk, counting receipts from yesterday's sale. He looked up as they entered, his round face registering surprise at the formal group. Well now, what brings such a delegation so early? Clara stepped forward, setting her satchel on his desk. We need your sworn testimony regarding the sale of an iron safe to Mr. Hale 2 months ago. That old rust bucket? Simmons scratched his head. What of it? The exact terms of sale, Jonas said quietly. And what was included? Understanding dawned in the auctioneer's eyes. Ah, this about them little girls, is it? He leaned back, studying Jonas. Heard talk you found them inside. We need your official statement, Clara pressed, the precise wording of the sale. Simmons nodded slowly. Fair enough. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Sale was proper and legal. Item listed as 1 iron safe and contents complete. No restrictions or exceptions noted. He wrote carefully, then signed with a flourish. That's gospel truth, and I'll swear to it before any judge. Their next stop was the blacksmith's shop. The big man paused in his work as they approached, setting down his hammer. Sweat gleamed on his soot-streaked face despite the morning chill. Figured you'd be coming, he rumbled, heard about the marshal's visit yesterday. Will you testify that you've seen how Jonas cares for the children? Clara asked. The blacksmith nodded. Seen them plenty, always clean, well-fed, learning their letters too. He wiped his hands on his apron. Ain't right, trying to take them. Man treats those girls like they're pure gold. Henry spoke for the first time. Write it down? Your words carry weight in town. The big man's statement was brief but powerful, his rough hand forming careful letters. Jonas tucked the paper safely away with the others. They visited more homes throughout the morning. The minister's wife recalled the girls' sweet singing in church. The mercantile owner testified to Jonas buying proper food and clothing. Even the telegraph operator contributed a note about seeing Jonas teach the twins to feed his mules with gentle patience. By noon, the satchel bulged with statements. They paused at the boarding house for coffee, reviewing their progress. Clara sorted the papers into careful order while Henry kept watch through the window. Sheriff's been following us, he mentioned quietly, riding past each place after we leave. Jonas's jaw tightened. Trying to pressure folks to change their stories? Some might, Clara admitted, but most will stand firm. They've seen the truth with their own eyes. They had one more vital stop. The widow McPherson lived alone in a small house near the church. Her word carried special weight as she'd lost her own daughter in the war. They found her working in her front garden, resistant to winter's approach. I've been expecting you, she said, straightening slowly. Come inside. Her parlor was neat but shabby, filled with faded daguerreotypes. She settled into a worn armchair, fixing Jonas with sharp eyes. Those girls need stability, she declared, need a father who'll raise them proper and God-fearing. She picked up her pen with arthritic fingers. I'll tell the judge how you brought them to church that first Sunday. How they were frightened but clean, holding tight to your hands. How you've shown nothing but patience and care. Her testimony was perhaps the most touching of all. She wrote of small details. Ava's new hair ribbon, Miriam's careful letters, the way Jonas carried them both when they fell asleep during long sermons. Any fool can see they're thriving, she concluded firmly. Would be pure sin to separate them now. The sun was sinking toward the mountains when they finally turned toward home. Jonas's back ached from the wagon seat, but hope had begun to bloom in his chest. So many had spoken for them, chosen to stand beside this unusual family. The judge will have to listen, Clara said, patting the bulging satchel. All these good people can't be wrong. Henry nodded. The law must see what is right, not just what is written. They crested the last rise to find Mrs. Peterson's boy waiting by the trail. All quiet, he reported proudly. No strangers came near. Jonas's tension eased slightly as they approached the cabin. Smoke rose straight from the chimney in the still evening air. The door flew open as they rolled up, and two small figures burst out. Papa, Papa! Jonas caught them both as they launched themselves at him, their bodies warm and vital against his chest. He breathed in their presence, their reality, their trust in him. Did you write your letters today? He asked, carrying them inside. Mrs. Peterson helped us practice, Miriam said, and we learned a new hymn. Show me, Jonas said, settling in his chair. The girls stood straight, hands clasped, and began to sing Sweet Hour of Prayer in their clear voices. Mrs. Peterson wiped her eyes with her apron as she gathered her shawl to leave. After supper, Jonas sat with the twins on either side of his chair. Tomorrow important people will come, he explained gently. They need to decide if you can stay here with me. Why? Ava's voice quavered. Don't they want us to have a papa? Jonas swallowed hard. Some folks don't understand about families like ours. But lots of people spoke up today. Told how well we fit together. We just have to pray the judge will listen. We've been praying all day, Miriam said solemnly. Mrs. Peterson taught us a special prayer for it. That's good, Jonas managed. That's real good. Later, after tucking them into bed, Jonas lay on his own pallet, staring at the shadowed rafters. The cabin creaked softly in the night wind. From the girls' bed came whispered voices. Dear God, please let us stay with Papa. Please don't let them take us away. Jonas pressed his palms against his eyes, his own prayers rising silent but fierce. Everything that mattered in his world now rested on tomorrow's hearing. He'd done all he could to prepare, gathered support, proved his case, shown his love for these precious children. The rest was in God's hands, and the courthouse buzzed with whispers as townsfolk filed in, filling every wooden bench. Morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. Jonas sat straight-backed in his chair, the twins perched nervously beside him. Clara and Henry flanked them like sentinels. Judge Samuel Rollins settled into his high-backed chair, his white beard neat against his black coat. He adjusted his spectacles, surveying the crowded room with practiced patience. Sheriff Pike strode forward, boots clicking against pine boards. Your Honor, this man harbored contraband unlawfully. Those children were cargo on the riverboat Mercury, properly registered as such. His voice carried a note of triumph. If it please the court, Jonas said quietly, rising to his feet. He withdrew the auction receipt from his vest pocket, the paper crisp and official. I purchased that safe and its contents, legal and proper. The auctioneer stood from his place in the gallery. That's truth, Your Honor. Sale was recorded proper. 1 iron safe and contents complete. No restrictions noted. Clara stepped forward next, her testimony clear and measured. I've watched Mr. Hale care for these children as his own. They attend school, learn their letters, and join us every Sunday at worship. Henry Gray Elk rose, his dignity silencing the room. Among my people, we judge a man by how he treats the helpless. Jonas Hale has shown nothing but honor in protecting these little ones. One by one, townsfolk stood to speak. The blacksmith, the minister's wife, the widow McPherson, each affirming Jonas's character and care for the twins. The sheriff's face darkened as whispers spread about bribes paid to claim the children. His deputy shifted uneasily in his seat before standing. Your Honor, the young man's voice shook. I took coin to keep quiet about them planning to sell the girls. I cannot stay silent now. The courthouse erupted in angry murmurs. Judge Rollins banged his gavel 3 times. Order! His stern gaze swept the room to silence. He studied the papers before him, then looked directly at Jonas and the twins. The law is clear in this matter. Mr. Hale purchased that safe and its contents legally. More importantly, he has proven himself a worthy guardian through his actions and character. The judge's voice carried authority. I hereby confirm Jonas Hale as rightful guardian of Miriam and Ava, the contents of his purchased safe. Sheriff Pike slammed his hat on his head and stormed out. Jonas gathered both girls into his arms as they cried with joy. Around them, the courthouse filled with applause, even from those who had once doubted this unusual family. Outside the courthouse, townsfolk gathered around Jonas like spring flowers blooming after winter frost. Hands reached out to shake his, shoulders patted his back, and voices lifted in congratulation. Clara Whitfield dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her smile bright through happy tears. Henry Gray Elk's strong hand clasped Jonas's shoulder. You have become a father twice over, my friend, he said, his dark eyes warm with approval. Once by heart, and now by law. The words settled deep in Jonas's chest, true as sunrise. The twins clung to Jonas's coat as he helped them onto the wagon seat. Their small fingers twisted in the worn fabric, not from fear now, but from joy. As they rode toward home, the winter sun broke through the clouds like God's own blessing, painting the valley in sheets of golden light. The mules' hooves crunched steadily on the frozen ground, carrying them toward their future. Word had spread fast as wind-borne seeds. By the time they reached the cabin, neighbors were already arriving. Women carried covered dishes and pies, their aprons fluttering in the crisp air. Men brought small gifts wrapped in brown paper, a wooden top, hair ribbons, a picture book. Miriam and Ava twirled in their new dresses, the ones Clara had lovingly stitched. They chased each other around Henry's patient horse, their laughter ringing clear as bell chimes against the mountains. The animal lowered his head, letting them pet his velvet nose. Jonas stood on his porch watching it all with wonder. These same folks who had once turned away now filled his yard with friendship. The kindness nearly brought him to his knees. As evening draped her purple shawl across the sky, no one seemed eager to leave. Lanterns were lit, casting warm circles of light through the cabin windows. Voices raised in familiar hymns, harmony floating out into the darkness. The twins sang too, their sweet voices joining the chorus as they leaned against Jonas's sides. His once lonely cabin overflowed with the warmth of community and family found. The morning sun painted golden strips across Jonas's cabin floor. Outside, his axe rang steady against pine logs, each stroke precise and purposeful. Near the tree line, Miriam and Ava scampered like tiny squirrels, their giggles floating on the crisp air as they gathered pine cones in their apron pockets. "Look, Papa." Miriam held up a particularly large cone. "This one's big as my hand." Clara Whitfield's mare nickered from where it was hitched, and soon the schoolmarm appeared around the bend, her satchel full of learning materials. Inside the warm cabin, she spread primers across the table while the twins settled eagerly beside her. Their small fingers traced letters in the firelight, voices stumbling, then growing confident over each new word. "That's right," Clara encouraged. "Draw the M just like a mountain peak." The afternoon brought Henry Gray Elk, a fresh deer, across his horse. His skilled hands made quick work of the meat, showing the girls how to wrap portions in cloth. Jonas watched his friend's gentle patience with the children, thankful for such teaching. They worked together preparing supper, the cabin filled with savory smells and easy conversation. Jonas stirred the venison stew, marveling at how different everything felt from his solitary days. Where silence once pressed heavy as mountain snow, now lived the warm pulse of family. When night drew its curtain, Jonas tucked the twins into their bed. Their small hands clasped his calloused ones with surprising strength. "Papa," Ava whispered, her eyes serious in the lamplight, "don't ever leave." "Promise?" Miriam added softly. Jonas's throat tightened. "I promise," he managed, voice rough with emotion. "I'm staying right here." Later, alone by the hearth, his gaze fell on the iron safe he'd kept, its door hanging open, transformed from prison to providence. The firelight caught its rusty hinges, reminding him of that life-changing auction day. Jonas knelt, bowing his head in prayer, thanking God for the precious gift he'd never thought to ask for, the blessing of unexpected family. The winter wind whistled fierce across the mountain ridges, but inside Jonas's cabin, warmth and contentment held firm against the cold. The evening meal's dishes had been cleared, and the rich aroma of coffee mingled with pine smoke from the hearth. Jonas settled into his rocking chair, cradling Miriam and Ava as they drifted toward sleep, their small bodies heavy with trust against his chest. Clara Whitfield and Henry Gray Elk sat close to the fire, their cups steaming in the lamplight. The schoolmarm's eyes sparkled as she described her plans for a spring garden behind the schoolhouse. "The children could learn their letters while tending vegetables," she mused, smiling at the sleeping twins. Henry nodded, his voice gentle in the quiet room. "Good medicine watching green things grow. These little ones will need to learn the ways of the land." Jonas gazed down at his daughters, their peaceful faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Ava's fingers curled into his shirt, while Miriam's soft breath matched her sister's. How different this moment was from the endless, silent evenings he'd endured after losing his wife. Back then, loneliness had pressed against these walls like winter frost until that remarkable day at the auction when Providence had led him to that rusted safe. "You've given me family again, Lord," Jonas whispered, his voice rough with gratitude. The words settled in the warm air like a prayer. Rising carefully so as not to wake the girls, Jonas crossed to the iron safe that still stood against the wall. Its open door had long ceased its creaking. With gentle reverence, he pushed it closed one final time. No longer a prison, but a testament to God's mysterious ways. Returning to his chair, Jonas gathered Miriam and Ava close, their small bodies fitting perfectly in his embrace. The cabin that had once echoed with emptiness now overflowed with love, laughter, and the quiet blessing of belonging. His heart swelled with thankfulness for this miracle of restoration, this gift of family found in the most unexpected place. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.